On today's episode, we're out here taking a look at the artist formerly known as the Hyundai Genesis. This is now called the Genesis G80. The name change is due to Hyundai creating a standalone luxury brand. So Genesis is now to Hyundai what Lexus is to Toyota. Starting off the brand new Genesis brand, we have this G80 midsize sedan, which is a direct competitor to the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, the BMW 5 Series, and especially the Lexus GS. And then we have the G90, which is an all-new vehicle for this year, and that is competing directly with the 7 Series and the Lexus LS. For 2017, the G80 is very much the old Hyundai Genesis with the new Genesis badging on the vehicle. However, that's changing for 2018 because in 2018, we're going to be getting a new front bumper, a new rear bumper, a new twin-turbo V6 engine under the hood, and some interior tweaks. While we wait to get our hands on the new 2018 model, we'll be talking in this video about the 2017 model, but I will be pointing out some of the differences between this and the 2018 model that we do expect to see in the spring of the 2017 calendar year. Up front, we have the same basic grille design that we've seen in the Genesis for some time, and we have these large and angry HID headlamps. HID headlamps are standard for 2017, but in 2018 we'll be getting LED headlamps, at least in certain models. Below that, we have LED fog lamps and very well integrated parking sensors. The luxury segment is known for having large and bold front ends, and the G80 is no different. For 2018, things get a little bit angrier with some extra curls up here from the fog light area into the grille area, making it look just a little bit angrier. At 196.5 inches long, the G80 is one of the longer mid-size luxury sedans on sale in the United States. This is just about 4 inches shorter than a Lexus LS. However, it is about 10 inches shorter than the Genesis G90. So the G90 is that very large, full-size luxury vehicle. Very much like the Mercedes and the BMW, the G80 has this very long and upright hood. The reason for that is that we have a 5-liter V8 engine available under there, and the G80 is, of course, rear-wheel drive. Unlike some luxury brands, the Genesis brand is not trying to compete with the Germans with front-wheel drive vehicles. At this point, all the Genesis models are rear-wheel drive, and we do expect to see that continue for at least the foreseeable future. Hyundai's decision to create dedicated rear-wheel drive platforms for their luxury brand really shows that the Genesis brand is going after things just a little bit differently than some of the other luxury brands out there like Acura, Lincoln, or even Lexus with some of their vehicles. Out back, we find these large tail lamp models which wrap from the body onto the trunk lid, and we have amber turn signals, as you can see over there on the other side. Right in the middle of the trunk lid, you'll notice we have the new Genesis logo, which is this sort of winged shield logo. G80 badging right there, and because we're in the 5-liter V8 model, we have quad exhaust tips lower on the bumper. For 2017, the G80 has a fairly traditional luxury car engine lineup. Things start out with a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder engine producing 311 horsepower. Then we can get this optional 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine that produces 420 horsepower and 383 pound-feet of torque. For 2018, things get a little bit more like the Germans with the addition of a 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6 engine. That will produce 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. All 3 engines are mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission that was designed especially for the Genesis line. All-wheel drive is available in the G80, but at this time only in the 3.8-liter V6 model. Fuel economy for 2017 ranges between 22 miles per gallon for the 3.8-liter V6 model, down to 18 miles per gallon if you get this 5-liter V8. I'm going to give front seat comfort 9 out of 10 points in the trim that we're driving, 8 out of 10 points in the base model. Our model has the optional extending thigh cushion, we have the standard 4-way adjustable lumbar support, and we have inflatable side bolsters. The G80 is marked by a high level of standard equipment even for the luxury segment, because in the luxury car segment these days we are not finding leather upholstery as standard. Typically it is leatherette. We do have leather seat standard, we have that 4-way adjustable lumbar support standard, something you don't find in your average Lexus or Infiniti, and we also have a power tilt telescopic steering column standard. The rear seat score drops down to 8 out of 10 points because even though I have an enormous amount of legroom, more legroom than you find in the average entry in this segment certainly, I have a little less headroom than we find in the more upright entries like the Volvo S90 or the BMW 5 Series. The legroom that we find in the G80 is most noticeable if I move over here to the right side of the vehicle where this front seat was all the way back at its track, suitable for a 6'5" passenger. It's also in a decently reclined position versus the driver's seat, so you can see I still have adequate legroom left there, but again, limited headroom. Like most vehicles in this segment, the middle seat is a little bit higher off the ground in order to give these outboard seats more of a bucket shape, and that means you're going to get even less headroom right there in the middle. But we do have a softly padded center armrest with large cup holders and a ski pass-through. Something worth noting versus a few of the European entries is that the rear seats in our model do not fold. So this is a fixed in-place rear bench seat with that ski pass-through. At 15.3 cubic feet of storage space, the Genesis G80 has one of the larger trunks in this segment, although it's not quite as large as the brand new Volvo S90. Because of the overall shape of this trunk, I wasn't able to fit more than 4 of these 24-inch roller bags in the trunk, and I did have to jam them in this sort of unusual position. There's not quite enough room back there for this blue bag that's right here behind this pink one in order to fit flush against the back seats. It's just not quite enough room back there, and there also isn't enough room for them to be all side by side. That means that although this trunk is larger than the average entry in this segment, I wasn't able to fit that much more of this standard sized luggage in it. I was able to fit one more bag in the S90. Thanks to the generous size of this cargo area, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points in our exclusive trunk comfort index. We do lose a few points by having a rear seat that is fixed into place. I do love seat backs that fold down. It really improves the cargo practicality. However, we have more room in this cargo area than we find in a number of the smaller entries in this segment, and we have a power trunk lid in the upper end trims as well as a helper handle in the lower end trims to help you close the trunk lid. Keeping in mind we are in the top end 5-liter trim, we have 4-way adjustable headrests, both the driver and the front passenger, height adjustable seat belts, and we have this very large panoramic moonroof which goes all the way over there to just above the rear seats. Panoramic moonroofs seem to be a little rare in this segment. Even though we are in an expensive luxury car segment, a lot of the entries just have a small standard moonroof over the first row. As I said earlier, leather upholstery is standard, and in our model we have contrasting stitching and perforations because these seats are both heated and ventilated. As we see with some Lexus models, the passenger seat does not have quite the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Most notably, it is lacking that extending thigh cushion. If we move on over to the front door panels, these are composed almost entirely of soft touch plastics, and we have this open pore dark wood trim right here. This is not an imitation trim. This actually is real wood. You can definitely see the very pronounced grain there. The wood is stained, but it doesn't have a lacquer finish over the top of everything, so it's not glossy like we see in certain Lexus or Infiniti models. That wood trim continues on over to the fairly upright dashboard. You can see that very large expanse of wood that goes all the way over there from the passenger side and then along the bottom of the infotainment screen. As you'd expect out of a luxury vehicle, even the lower portions of the dash panel are made from a soft touch injection molded plastic, and we have a moderately sized bin-style glove compartment. I was not able to fit a full-sized iPad inside. Because we're in one of the upper end trims with one of the top-end audio systems, we have a center channel speaker right there and surround sound in the cabin. The G80's take on this infotainment system is a little bit different than what we see in the larger G90. It's also a little bit different than the average luxury entry, because although we have a controller knob in the center of the dash, you can see those icons highlighting around there, this is also a touchscreen system, so we can actually click right there on the screen and get the option that you want. Below the infotainment screen, we find a 2-zone automatic climate control system and an analog clock. The start-stop button is right over here. The rear of the passenger compartment does have a manual temperature control, which can vary the temperature of the air coming out of the vents, but it's not really a complete third zone. Below the climate control system, we have our audio system controls with a single-slot optical disc player, some direct access buttons, and the SD card for the mapping database right here behind this little door. Continuing behind from that, we have our fairly traditional console shifter. Drive is all the way to the back, as you see there. Manual mode is over to the left. We press up for up and down for down, and our model also has shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel. We then have a drive mode button, which allows us to select between Eco, Normal, and Sport. Auto brake hold, which keeps the brake pressure so you don't have to hold the brake pedal at stoplights. And then we have 2 moderately sized cup holders on the right side of that. Continuing down the center console, we have the controls for our heated and ventilated seats, parking sensors, and the controller for that infotainment system. Again, the infotainment system is a touchscreen or controller style system, so we can use these buttons to go to the phone, home, back button, menu button, map, nav, etc. And then we also have this rotary knob which scrolls around, toggles up, down, side to side, and clicks down to enter. Although our model has one of the top-end Lexicon audio systems in the G80, the speaker grills are not quite as entertaining as what we see in certain Volvo or Mercedes models, but that's changing for 2018 because we're getting a few interior tweaks to make it look a little bit more interesting. Between the front seats, we have an armrest that splits in the middle to reveal a storage cubby right there inside. It is large and deep for a rear-wheel drive sedan, especially one with air vents right there behind the center console. And then in front of it, we have a small slot where you can put pens or pencils, or you can even stick your smartphone right there. On the driver's side, we have a partial LCD instrument cluster. We have a speedometer and a tachometer that are physical dials, and then everything in between that is this large 7-inch LCD. The LCD is where you'll find your typical trip computer information, navigation turn-by-turn directions, the status of the vehicle's safety systems, multimedia information, and reminders about vehicle servicing and tire pressure. You can also adjust certain vehicle settings right here inside this display, including what you find in the heads-up display, what options are available in there, how it's rotated, how bright it is, etc. The steering wheel is a 4-spoke design with some very small sport grips right up top, paddles on the back of the wheel, down on the left and up on the right. We have the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control right over here on the right side of the steering wheel. Radar adaptive cruise control is standard in all G80 models. And then this button right up here and this rotary knob control that multifunction display between the speedometer and the tachometer. Over on the left side of the wheel, we have our dedicated phone hang-up and pick-up buttons, mode button, voice command button, volume and mute button, and then track forward, backward. This also acts to tune the radio. Acceleration falls in between the averages for this segment. If you get the V6 version of the G80, then we'll run from 0 to 60 just under 6 seconds. That's notably slower than something like a Lexus GS 350, and that's because the G80 is one of the larger and one of the heavier entries in this segment. If you get the 5-liter V8 under the hood, then you'll run from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds, and the 0 to 30 time is exceptionally quick for this segment. Of course, the price tag of the G80 is important to keep in mind because this is priced more like a BMW 540i or a 528i than a 550i. So the 550i is going to be undoubtedly faster than this. It's also going to be significantly more expensive. Because of the curb weight in the G80, we ran from 60 to 0 in 119 feet in our braking test score. That is a little bit longer than most of the entries with which this will compete. Something like a Volvo S90 will stop considerably shorter than this at 108 feet. Not only does the 5-liter V8 make the Genesis G80 a little bit heavier overall than some of the competition, especially those twin-turbo V6 competitors, but it also means we have a little bit more weight up front than the average entry in this segment. Definitely more weight than the upcoming twin-turbo 6-cylinder or the V6 version of the G80. Although this G80 is a little bit more nose-heavy than the V6 version, it is still better balanced than something like an Audi A6. The Audi A6 has its engine entirely in front of the front axle. This is obviously going to be better balanced than a Lincoln or an Acura competitor, which would be front-wheel drive based or optionally all-wheel drive. The G80 definitely handles well, but it lacks some of the feel that we find in the Lexus GS or in the Cadillac CTS or in the Jaguar XF. The G80 actually reminds me an awful lot of the short wheelbase Lexus LS, and I think that's actually a compliment for the G80. This vehicle is prioritizing a comfortable ride and more isolation from the road than in your average sporty entry like the Cadillac CTS V Sport or certain entries from Europe like the Jaguar XF. Actual road holding is only slightly below the average V8 entry in this segment. That's primarily because the Genesis has a little bit more weight up front. Out on rougher road surfaces like this, the suspension tune of the G80 is very obvious. This is more Lexus-like, more Lexus GS or LS-like actually, than something like a Mercedes-Benz E43 AMG or some of the sportier entries in this segment like a Cadillac CTS V Sport. The ride is very similar to most versions of the BMW 5 Series because the 5 Series really is more of a luxury-tuned vehicle in most formats than a sport-tuned vehicle. Even though performance-wise this is somewhat more like the Lexus GS F, the suspension tune is definitely softer and more comfortable. It's more of a luxurious ride than a sporty ride. I do expect the upcoming sport trim with the twin-turbo V6 to have a firmer ride than this vehicle. It also is going to have a dynamic suspension system so you can adjust how firm or how soft you want the ride to be. As with the Lexus LS, an isolated cabin was definitely a priority in the G80, and our cabin noise score came in at 69 decibels, making this one of the quietest cabins in this segment. Because Genesis is using a relatively large displacement V8 engine under the hood, not a 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder turbocharged engine, fuel economy is definitely towards the bottom end of this segment. We've been averaging 18 miles per gallon, which is just about what the EPA says we should get, but you can find vehicles with this kind of acceleration with considerably better fuel economy scores. We don't really know what the performance figures are going to be like out of the upcoming 3.3-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine, but I expect it to be fairly close to this vehicle because of its more advantageous horsepower and torque curve and the fact that they're both using this excellent 8-speed automatic transmission. It's likely that fuel economy is going to be better in that 3.3-liter V6 than this V8 as well. A number of you have asked me if the G80 drives more like a Hyundai Sonata or more like a European luxury vehicle? And the answer may surprise you. This drives more like a classic European luxury vehicle. This reminds me a great deal of previous generation naturally aspirated Mercedes-Benz E-Class models, and of course the Lexus LS 460. The G80 has a very solid, almost Germanic feel to it out on the road. Decent amount of road isolation, of course, because of the mission of this particular vehicle. However, this definitely feels more like a traditional rear-wheel drive luxury car than your average mid-size family sedan. Although the G80 handles well, the big thing to keep in mind is that this vehicle was not designed to be a corner carver in the same way as the Lexus GSF or the Cadillac CTS V Sport or certain versions of the Jaguar XF. Instead, the G80 goes after more traditional luxury car qualities like excellent handling coupled with a supple ride and a very isolated cabin. The other thing worth noting about the G80 is this 8-speed automatic transmission. This is not a ZF automatic, it's not a General Motors automatic, it's not an Aisin automatic. This was actually in-house developed by Hyundai specifically for the Genesis family of vehicles. That means that this transmission was designed with the 10-year 100,000-mile powertrain warranty in mind. More impressive than that is the way that this transmission shifts. This transmission is not quite as fast or as willing to downshift as the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, but it definitely feels more put together than the General Motors 8-speed in the Cadillacs or the Aisin 8-speed automatic transmission in the Lexus models. As we all expected, 2017 brings a price increase for the artist formerly known as the Hyundai Genesis. The 2017 G80 starts at $41,400 in the rear-wheel drive V6 trim. You add $2,500 if you want that same model with all-wheel drive. That $2,500 is a little bit more than the average all-wheel drive upgrade because Hyundai also includes things like a heated steering wheel with that all-wheel drive package. One of the things that has not changed with the Genesis is the incredible amount of standard equipment that we find in the vehicle versus your average luxury sedan in this category. We have standard xenon headlamps, standard radar cruise control, autonomous braking, lane keeping assistance system, navigation, leather seats, XM radio, and rain sense wipers. Those are all things that we typically find optional in other mid-size luxury vehicles. Again, keep in mind, leather upholstery specifically is standard in the Genesis G80, and that's optional in just about every other mid-size luxury vehicle. To keep the inventory streamlined, there are really only 4 ways you can get your Genesis G80. You can get it in that base form with or without all-wheel drive. You can get it in the premium trim, which adds a 14-speaker sound system, LED fog lamps, panoramic moonroof, parking sensors. That's definitely a package that I would step up into if I were shopping in this segment, and that would cost you $46,000. And then we have the Ultimate package, which is basically what we've been driving. And you can choose between the 3.8-liter V6 engine or the 5-liter V8 engine in that Ultimate package G80. 2 very important things to keep in mind about the Ultimate package G80. First off is that you lose the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support that we find in the lower end models. That's because the 8-inch infotainment system and the 9.2-inch infotainment system are not running the same software. They're closely related, but they're not the same, and at the moment, the 9.2-inch system does not support CarPlay. The other thing to keep in mind is that low price, $54,500 for the V8 Ultimate package, $50,350 for the V6 Ultimate. Keeping those prices in mind, let's now move on to the competition. The first thing we should mention is that the Genesis used to be a Chrysler 300 or perhaps Dodge Charger alternative with a slightly nicer interior and a few more luxury options. But those days really are over. The Genesis is not really a Chrysler 300 competitor these days. Although they are both rear-wheel drive vehicles with V6s and optional V8s, the Chrysler 300 is considerably less expensive. It starts at $32,340 and it's considerably less premium on the inside. In addition to that, the G80 now belongs to a separate luxury brand, and it didn't in the past. And so in the past, you could compare the Hyundai Genesis perhaps a little bit more closely to a Chrysler 300, but that's a little bit trickier these days. The long and short of it is that Chrysler is dedicated to keeping the Chrysler 300 a mainstream vehicle, and Hyundai is not doing that with the Genesis brand and the Genesis G80 in particular. The Lexus GS has traditionally been the value entry in this luxury car segment, as well as the most reliable entry in this luxury car segment. But I suspect that's going to change because the Genesis G80 really is targeted directly at the Lexus GS. I personally think that the G80 is more attractive than the GS inside and out. It has a longer warranty than the Lexus GS. The G80 is of course well priced, but unlike many of the well-priced competitors, like the Lexus GS, The Genesis G80 has a much wider portfolio of engine options. That's something that we don't really see from Lexus at this time. We have that 3.8-liter V6 engine. We also have the upcoming 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6, the 5-liter V8 engine, and we expect to see other engines from Hyundai in rapid succession. Over on the Lexus GS side, we have the base 2-liter turbocharged engine, which is one of the less powerful engines available in the entire segment. Then we have their 3.5-liter V6 engine, and then we have the Lexus GSF, which is almost a performance entry in this segment, but the production is very, very limited. So if you just want a 5-liter V8 Lexus GS, you actually may have troubles finding one on the dealer lot. Over on the Genesis lot, the 420 horsepower V8 engine is readily available, and it's also considerably less expensive than the Lexus GSF. In fact, the G80 is less expensive than the Lexus GS overall, because the GS 200T starts at $45,615. It's notably slower than any version of the Genesis G80, and it drinks premium unleaded, whereas the Genesis will take regular. Not only is the starting price higher, but it also has thousands of dollars less standard equipment. No radar cruise control, no leather upholstery, and no navigation will be found in that base Lexus model. A Lexus GS 350 starts at $50,695 if you want their V6 engine, and although it will be a little bit faster than the V6 Genesis G80, it is much more expensive. When you compare a comparable GS 350 to the G80 5.0 Ultimate, you'll notice that the Lexus will be thousands of dollars more expensive. And even though it's going to be more fuel efficient than the Genesis, those thousands of dollars can buy you an awful lot of gasoline. The GS handles unquestionably well. It is one of the best handling and best feeling entries in this particular segment. However, if you were to take the Genesis G80 5.0 and a GS 350 out on a track, the Genesis is going to beat the Lexus every time, even though it's not going to feel quite as connected to the driver, and it's not going to handle as well, quite simply because it is significantly faster. Moving over to Germany, we have the Audi A6 at $47,600. It's significantly more expensive than the base Genesis G80, and for that price, you only get a 2-liter turbocharged engine and front-wheel drive in your Audi. If you want the twin-turbo V6 under the hood of your A6, that'll set you back $58,600. Although all-wheel drive is included, that is more expensive than the most expensive G8 with the 5-liter V8 engine. The Audi V6 is going to be faster than the G80 V6, but it's not going to be as fast as the G80 with the 5-liter V8. One important thing to keep in mind is that most trims of the Audi A6 do include all-wheel drive standard, and you can't get all-wheel drive in that top-end V8 trim of the G80 for some reason. Although the Genesis G80's handling figures are not the highest in this segment, nor is the handling feel, I would actually say they're fairly comparable to the Audi A6. The A6 is unusual in this segment because the engine is entirely in front of the front axle, and that actually gives the A6 a weight balance that's a little bit more similar to your average front-wheel drive car than your average rear-wheel drive car, and the Genesis has a near-perfect 50-50 weight balance if you get the V6. Next up, we have the brand new BMW 5 Series. BMW has done an excellent job with the 2017 5 Series. It has one of the best interiors in this segment, and everything that BMW does with the 5 Series is done very well. It may not be the absolute best when it comes to handling feel, but it is very good in this segment. It may not have the best acceleration times in this segment, but they are towards the top end as well. Unfortunately, the high scores and the high level of polish that we find in the BMW 5 Series come with a price tag that matches, because the 2-liter turbocharged 5 Series starts at $50,200. If you want the 6-cylinder turbocharged engine, that's $55,850, and again, you don't get navigation or leather upholstery for those prices. When you compare the BMW to the Genesis, you will definitely notice that BMW has spent a little bit more time on the interior, a little bit more time on the exterior. The BMW has a high level of polish. It's put together with a degree of precision that we don't see necessarily in all aspects of the G80. The big difference, of course, again, is that price tag. Because the Genesis G80 may be slightly behind the 5 Series, but it's not very far behind in terms of overall polish, overall feature content, etc., but it's significantly behind the 5 Series when it comes to the price tag. Last up, we have another Lexus, the Lexus ES. Now, I realize the Lexus ES is not perhaps the most direct competitor to a rear-wheel drive Genesis G80, however, they are quite similar in price. The Lexus ES starts just under $39,000 for the front-wheel drive V6 version, and that version does not get you navigation or leather upholstery for that price tag. If you were to add all the options to your Lexus ES, you'd end up right around $50,000, which is just about the most expensive you can configure your V6 Genesis G80. Although the Lexus ES has proven to be a very reliable vehicle, so has the Genesis G80, and Genesis is giving us a very long powertrain warranty, the longest in the luxury car segment. When it comes to performance, there really isn't any comparison. The Genesis G80 stops shorter, accelerates faster, and handles better than the Lexus ES. It also has a more traditional rear-wheel drive power bias. Although the Lexus ES delivers an excellent ride, the G80 also feels a little bit more premium and more Germanic, more luxury car-like behind the wheel. The Lexus ES feels a little bit lighter, and of course, it is again a front-wheel drive car. Comparisons in the mid-size luxury sedan segment are a little bit tricky because there is such a wide range, and again, you could include entries like the Lexus ES at the bottom end of the range. At the top end of the range, we have an incredible variety. My top pick in this segment would still have to be the Volvo S90 in T6 inscription trim. The main reason for that happens to be the interior, the electronics, and the way the vehicle is overall integrated and put together. However, even though the Volvo S90 is a good deal in the luxury car segment, a Genesis G80 5-liter V8 is still going to be less expensive than that Volvo. Therefore, the Genesis G80 takes my top value pick in this segment. Brand is unquestionably something that luxury car shoppers look for, and that's exactly why Genesis is now its own brand, rather than simply being a model under the Hyundai umbrella. That transition, of course, is costing Hyundai a decent amount of money, and that's why we're seeing the Genesis G80 be a little bit more expensive than the Hyundai Genesis was. However, this transition should add some additional value to luxury car shoppers that are definitely looking for a brand that they can get behind. And of course, my last pick in this segment, if money were absolutely no object, would be the 2017 BMW 550i all-wheel drive. Absolutely beautifully put together, and it's incredibly fast. But of course, we must always come back to value, and it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars more expensive than the brand new Genesis G80. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. Be sure and check out those related videos on the side of your screen. Let me know what you think about the G80 down there in the comments section down below. Especially let me know what you think about the brand new Genesis brand. I'll see you next week.